This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, and Molly, that's your screen. It's all you, Molly.
All right. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
All right. So today we're going to talk about fabric trim and art. So this is also referenced as, you'll hear me call it the fabric master. Just like we call design development the design master, we'll call this the fabric master. Kind of blue cherry lingo for you guys to get used to. Today we're going to go over a basic overview of what the FTA is, what you do inside of it, how to kind of get things done, and what its basic functionality is. Ask questions as they come up. I'll try to give you guys a pause in between each of these little sections that we've got outlined here so that we can go over any questions, concerns you might have about the module. So first things first, to go over a little bit of yesterday, kind of how to find the FTA. Yesterday we learned about the navigation panel over here on the left-hand side. So we're going to unroll it, and all you're going to do is type in fabric. It's got that smart search capability, and double click on it to open up the FTA or the fabric master. So from here, you're going to see again your search or filter pane on the left-hand side. That's standard within most of Blue Cherry. So you've got the same ability to filter and find things that you did and that we went over yesterday in the Design Master. So here you can see this is the fabric trim and header. This is the vendor tab, the FTA colors tab, and the approval tracking tab. These are all of the fields that you can use to search and find items once you guys get things loaded in here. And based off of where that field is where you'll find it on one of these tabs. So you'll see how that relates to an FTA record once we go in there and overview it. But I did want to go over the filter here, let you guys know it's the same thing, same type of idea that's in the Design Master. What you do is you can type into one of these fields, and then you click apply. You can also click enter, and it'll bring up any record that has that specific filter value that you've entered in there. Again, to go over this briefly, that asterisk is a wildcard search. So say I was looking for anything that started with BL or had BL in the name, you can wrap it in asterisk, and it'll give you that wildcard search. This is super helpful again in finding what you're looking for. And again, this has that same kind of basic level of Blue Cherry reporting that we had in the Design Master, where you can pull up records, and you'll see this once we create one. They will appear here in that grid view. You can export those results. And you can also customize the columns that appear through Filter Builder, which we're going to go over with David and Melissa next Friday. So they can be considering kind of what basic level reports or exports of data that you might need. Very useful when it comes down to creating lists of things. So to create a new record here, all we're going to do is click new. The copy feature will be available as soon as we have a record that is built in here. Again, basic navigation, you've got your ribbon up top. So this is like any Microsoft program really, where you've got new, save, and some basic functionality here. Undo is great, delete is also there. And I'll go over some of these things as soon as we kind of work through building out a record. So this up top, I'm going to roll this up so that...
Luz?
Yes.
Is that you making that Cookie Monster noises?
Not me.
Somebody, guys, put your microphone on mute, and it's up top left. You're going to see a picture of a microphone. It's green. When you click on it, it's going to be red. I'll be able to see it on my screen here. And then when you want to talk, just unclick it, please. Okay, go ahead, Molly. Cool. And also, if you want to ask those questions from previous too. Thank you.
So I'm going to hide the ribbon. This is just to give me a little bit more screen space. It's helpful to hide the navigation pane, the filter pane, and your ribbon once you kind of get used to working in Blue Cherry. So this is what an FTA record looks like. And keep in mind that Blue Cherry, again, is a very robust system with tons and tons of fields that you can rename and use for whatever real purpose the business designates a need for. So there's tons of fields that are on here. What we're going to do is I'm going to go over with, again, David and Melissa next Friday. We're going to go over how to use the screen builder. And at the end of the day, we're going to decide what fields are important for you guys, and we're going to remove anything that you don't need to use. Beyond the required fields, you can create and configure this thing in, 1,000 different ways. But the idea here is that once we've got it built out, it's preset so that you guys don't have to jump in between fields that you're not using. You don't even have to see them. We can just take them away completely. So it'll be a very simplified, streamlined look for you guys. So there are a couple of required fields when it comes to the FTA or Fabric Master Record. The first one is going to be division. And you guys are going to have one division so far is what we've notated. So you can right click on that and select it, or you could type in the division code of 01. The next field is not required but recommended, and this is the season. So we've already dictated some of you guys' season. I'm going to choose the current one that we're in of spring 19. And then you've got prototype number. So prototype number goes along with style. I'll talk about these two fields together. Prototype number is essentially like your design number in the design master, except this is specific to the FTA. And kind of what I encourage you guys to do is come up with the different types of FTA records that you're going to create. For example, some of the common ones are fabric records, trim records, and packaging records. It doesn't quite follow that abbreviation of FTA, but those are some of the common ones that I think you guys will come across. So the idea of the FTA is that this is a digital library of all your fabrics, your trims, your commonly used packaging templates for your designs. So here what I would recommend is that you guys create kind of like a design number for your FTAs. And in this way, you would, let's say we're going to create something for a fabric. So we can denote that with an F, and maybe we'll use like a 4 or 5 digit number here. We'll start with 0001, just for example. So the style number is also required. And this is required for the reason of a lot of our customers will promote things from a raw material status, and they will purchase raw materials. For the purposes of you guys, because your business is simple in the way that you only purchase finished goods, in general, what I would recommend here is that you're just going to copy and paste your prototype number into your style number. Now, there might also be another reason for you to change up that style number from your prototype number. What I've seen used before is, say that you source a fabric from a vendor and the vendor has its own style number for that fabric. So maybe it is, let's see, one of your vendor names, let's just call him vendor X. So maybe their style number for that fabric is VENDX001. And that's what their swatch that they gave you has on it. So you want to include that in this digital record, because at the end of the day, this Fabric Master record is going to be visible to the vendor through CSV. So essentially, you're going to send this record to them, and they're going to be able to fill out any of the details that you might be missing about that fabric, so that you don't have to do the data entry of it, and that they know that you're kind of interested in potentially creating submits for this, meaning lab dips, hand looms, strike-offs, adding colors to it, getting costing on it, those types of things. Any questions so far on the prototype number and the style number, and how those are linked, why they're required?
Yeah, let's assign action items now. Who's going to own the prototype number? References? I would suggest, go ahead.
So David, each user, when they're creating these prototypes, when they're creating the FTA records, they will be assigning their own prototype numbers. So
for testing purposes, let's give one.
Oh, okay. So who's going to create like an FTA record to test this puppy out?
Yeah. Luz, you okay with that?
Can you repeat that question?
So you're going to need, I'm going to sit with you and work on this probably after market week. So you're going to have to come up with a couple prototype numbers. And what was the other action item, Molly? Sorry.
No, kind of like coming up with the, I guess the layout of the prototype number is what Luz will be doing. Does she want to separate it and do it by, an F, or does she want to name it FAB, and how many numbers behind that. Like that numeric code and kind of that process needs to be considered by you guys. And that, David, I think you're saying like, let's let Luz take a shot at it.
Yeah, we need we need like a champion for that in design. Okay,
Sure.
Okay, I mean, once we sit down together and you explain it to me
you got it.
again, I think we can work something out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the next field going on, and then we can I'll come back around. Like once we've created a record, I want to show you a couple things on like how easy it really is to see what the next sequential number is and things to think about there, Luz. So we'll give you a little bit more background to flesh it out. Design type is next. Here it's pretty simple. You guys have two different design types. One's finished goods, one's raw material. In the fabric trim and art, in the Fabric Master, you're always creating a raw material. So you're just going to enter RM. Description, so this is where you can name your record, whatever it is. So let's say that we're creating, let's do 100% polyester. I don't love naming them, honestly, by the style content, so let me try that again. Can you guys give me the name of an existing style that you have out there, and we'll kind of try to recreate the record as an example?
Kind of like a base cloth?
Yes, that's exactly what we're looking for.
We can try just linen texture. Or
And
actually,
is that a common base class that you guys use, like repeatedly over and over on style?
we'll try slub linen. That's better for us.
Okay. All right, perfect. So slub linen texture is going to be our very first fabric in here. What we're saying now is that the season that is entered or was created in is spring 2019. Here's its prototype number. It has a vendor reference number, so this is going to be specific to that vendor at this point. If it's not specific to the vendor and it's like a commonly used fabric amongst all your vendors, that's where you would probably recreate that prototype number in the style number. It's a raw material, so we've already classified that. That little checkbox that we talked about yesterday is marked as active, and it automatically has an assigned entry date, and also down here in the lower right, it has an entry user assigned to it. So if you guys have to go back and say, hey Luz, hey Molly, like what were you thinking when you created this is not quite clear, or whatever and whatnot, need to go back and forth with somebody, those markers are there for how long ago it was created and who by. For size code, I'm not going to fill this out for you guys because size code for a raw material, if you're not purchasing it, really isn't necessary. That's probably going to be one of those fields we screen design away. Piece goods, this is a text entry field. If you guys find a reason to use it, it is there for you. Or you can rename that field if you find that you have another text entry type of field need. Think from style. So we'll leave that one alone because again, you guys aren't promoting. And then that's kind of like the base level information that you need to fill out at the top FTA info level. There's one more category that you need to complete in order to save the record, and that would be prototype category. So here we've got a couple of different things for you guys to choose from. And this, again, Luz, might help you kind of figure out how you want to name your prototype members. Is it a yarn dye? Is it a print? Is it a piece dye? Is it a trim? Or is it artwork? And these are preset options. You cannot change these because when you select one of these as your option, so Luz, this is a piece dye or is this a yarn dye? Your slub linen texture.
It's a yarn dyed.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to select yarn dye. When you select yarn dye, you get a couple of different fields that are different if you choose any other. So look at the changes if I select print. Suddenly I get options like type of print, and it's preloaded with a couple different options here for you guys to choose from to dictate how that item is or how that raw material is being created. So let's go through these just in detail.
Can we change that to a print because it does get a color gets printed on white goods. So seeing the subcategory, it helped explain where this is heading.
Yeah, totally. And I like print. It's a really good example to use because I feel like there's a very clear process involved in print. So let's go through and just fill this out as print. But first, let's look at some of these options. So for yarn dye, you've got aesthetic, warp count, health percent, weft count. Down here at the bottom, these all stay the same. So you'll just see like these top categories change. So for print, we'll save that one since we're going to use it. Piece dye is just piece dye type. What type of dyes are you using essentially to create that piece dye? Trim, if you have a color count. So say you've got a tassel and it's a 2-color tassel, then you would hit 2 for that color count. And we'll show you kind of what changes in the rest of the tabs of the FTA to accommodate that. Artwork, here you've got repeat size. If you want to catalog artwork in here, you absolutely can. And we've got repeat size, and we also have color count for artwork. So going back to the print, we've got type of print, pigment, reactive, discharge, printed ground, dyed ground, other. And we've got the direction of print, 1-way, 2-way, placed, border, and none. And then you've got your color count. This English print, I am not 100% sure what that's for, but I'm pretty sure that you guys can rename that and just use it as a flag box type of thing. But I'll kind of do a little bit more research on that. That's newer to version 9.
Is that maybe an engineered print?
Oh, thank you. Listen to me, English print. Thanks, Liz.
No.
So that's where you're going to do your check mark for engineered print. I got to get my brain in the game.
No, it just made sense. We're working on those now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so for your type of print, for this slub linen texture, what would your response be for the type of print for this?
Printed ground.
Okay. And the direction of print?
I would say 2-way.
Okay. Color count?
7.
Okay. And engineered?
No.
Okay.
Well, I guess this is, if it's a white base and it's being printed on with a design that has 7 colors, that doesn't make sense to me as what we're doing here. Because here it's just the slub linen texture, so it's no color, I guess.
Okay, so okay, let's think about this for a second. So honestly, this is kind of a great conversation to have, because when it comes to the FTA, I feel like this is where people can get tripped up. So if we're just creating the fabric record, which we kind of indicated here, we would just be creating the base cloth for the linen, correct?
Right, and it would be a white base cloth, so it would be no color.
Correct. And is that base cloth just a flat fabric? It doesn't actually have the texture on it. The print is what's giving it the texture?
It does have a little bit of texture in it.
Okay.
It has kind of like a faux slub linen look, and that's why we call it slub linen.
Got it. Okay, so there's 2 ways to do this, and we have to think about how we want to kind of build the FTA up. I've seen it done multiple ways. One is where every print that you're putting on a fabric has its own fabric master, has its own record. So it would have been very similar to what you were saying, to doing this as a slub linen texture. What that would have meant is that you are not creating separate artwork records for the FTA. You might find instances where you do it, but for the most part, it would have been set up just like this. This record would have included your base cloth information and your print information. So those 2 pieces together. And when you did your approvals or your requests, you would have been requesting strike-off. That tends to make the most sense for your business, I think. Yes. There might be instances where you're just loading base cloths and not doing anything to it, but that's more of kind of a piece good type of situation. We talked about in the BPR about you guys creating a separate record for artwork and a separate record for fabric. The reason why I don't like that is because it doesn't sound like you guys are doing a whole lot of just requesting a base cloth and doing a whole lot of artwork development. You're already doing them together with the fabric and the art, correct?
Correct.
But one of the things, so I think oh, hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Can you hear me? Sorry. One of the reasons I think Christine mentioned that though was, and I don't know how much going forward this will be the case, but so we're creating artwork. Our design team's creating artwork, and it can be printed on vinyl, or it can be printed on a heat transfer tablecloth, or it can be taken and put on a braided round. So in theory, you could have the same artwork printed on different bases.
Right.
But it might all be, we're doing holiday now, so it might all be, red truck Christmas or whatever, but it's all on different bases. So I think that was the only reason why we were considering it, because then you would add in your art and you'd add in your base. Thoughts, Luz?
Yeah.
I agree. I think the base cloth should be separate.
But I know where you're coming from, Molly, because we used to do it as just the print and the base together. But if we're going to start one way, we should always be one way.
Yeah, totally agree. It's got to be a strategy of which direction to go. And I think from knowing you guys' business and how, like, I'm remembering very visually that large catalog that you guys give Jared for selling, where it's got just essentially like all of your CAD artworks and saying like, yeah, we can put this on that and this on that. Essentially, like, here's like that Christmas truck in a placement, and here's it as with table runner detail and that kind of stuff. I'm kind of following that, and at the point of the BPR, I took it into consideration. I'm still leaning towards like putting the fabric and the art together, and I'll tell you why. Because what we didn't have at Ellery was the digital asset manager that you guys will have. And the digital asset manager is going to allow you guys to create those CADs and organize those CADs and create kind of those collections together. And this portion of the FTA is going to allow you to do your approvals in regards to lab dips, hammerings, and strike-offs. If we just had the artwork in here, or we just had the base class in here, you would probably never do anything with approval tracking on a base class. You would probably always do it on the artwork. And the thing is, later down the line, when you're going into approval tracking and you're just doing it on artwork, if you think about it, when you print that red Christmas truck on a polyester base cloth, when you print it on a vinyl, and when you print it on, say, a cotton, those are going to be 3 different approvals and 3 different processes that you need to follow. The color is going to appear very different on one versus the other versus the next. And so that's why I would recommend that you guys do fabric and artwork together, like this is currently laid out on the screen, versus doing the artwork as a separate FTA. I also think you guys would be creating huge amount of FTAs,
There's going to be
even more so.
Tremendous amount of extra work. Now, I just want to add one point. Melissa, you made a point where if you're going to do it one way, keep going that way. I totally agree with that. But what you can do is, if we decide that this isn't the route we want to go, we can just say the next season, this is how we're going to change a standard operating procedure. There's a lot of extra work in doing it both.
And it might also be the case too, that we work through like what we do for the conference room pilot when we're demoing the system essentially to a lot more users, that we set it up one way, kind of like, hey, here's option A of how we're working through the process. And then we set up 2 more records. So we would set up the base class and set up the artwork, work through the process, and then kind of you start to see where the gaps and holes are, or where the extra work is falling in, and, you know, kind of the troublesome issues that fall with one. And you can hear your user base really vote and say, this is going to be way easier if we do it this way, guys, versus that. And you yourself can speak to it as well.
Okay.
But since we started down this road, let's go with this example, and then you guys can think about how that other scenario might work when you're creating 2 records instead of 1 separately. So we can always go over that at the end too. So repeat size for your artwork. So at this point, I'm just going to make up some details, Luz, unless you have this stuff handy and you want to hand it over, and then we're creating kind of a real life record right now.
25 1/4.
All right. Yarn size?
That we normally don't put into any of our specs. So all this would be new for us. We would have to
Okay.
work with the vendors to confirm.
Okay. And this would be a perfect example of any fields that you have when you're creating your FTA are good to put in there. But since this record goes over to CSV, the vendor can see this, and you can request that every single FTA that you complete that has an F for fabric, that they fill in that yarn size information for you. You come to work the next day and yarn size is complete.
Okay.
And that way, if you have any questions on it or any kind of info that you need to look up at any point, like that kind of information is filled in. Gauge, finish, wash, all of these, even care code, I don't recommend because, again, you guys aren't doing any kind of raw material purchasing that you use care code. At this point, you're not going to tag the fabric with anything official. Vendor style is also down here. You could use that instead of this if you guys decide to configure that way. You can assign this to a designer if you wish. It sounds like you guys are using a lot of your fabrics, a lot of your artwork across different product categories. So use it if you need, if you find a reason for it. If not, we screen design it away. Every fabric master has a long description. Here's a reference field, just a table that's available for you guys to create whatever information that you might need for a user or the vendor to complete. There's style content here. I highly recommend you guys complete this because it's really nice to know what that base cloth really is. I think right now we only have a couple options loaded in here, so I'll just preload one so you guys can see what this looks like. We talked about material code yesterday. This is something we're going to be setting up. So if this was a plaid, a floral, a solid, those types of things, or if it was vinyl, or if it was, I'm sorry, I started out with examples of patterns instead of materials. So vinyl, if it was polyester, if it was cotton, those types of different materials that you guys want to categorize things as, you can fill that in here. If there's a cost associated with it, I don't think you guys will use that. Maybe you will, because again, you're not purchasing. There's style weight. This is really helpful if you have different weights of, say, cottons that are out there, like a 400T, a 200T cotton. Your weight ULM, you guys will probably screen design that away. Any questions on this kind of first design, the FTA info and the FTA header down here so far?
No.
Okay, so mode, good. Mode over here, we're going to hit do not create styles. We're going to default that so you guys don't just promote FTA records. You can do it from here. So as soon as you have these required fields that are listed as required up here in your prototype category, your mode selected, which will default, you can save the record. Oh, wah. Maybe I pressed the button. Hold on 1 second, I'm just gonna see if it did. All right. Well, I'm gonna recreate this quickly for us. Bear with me. Well, it's not liking something that I'm putting in here. I have a sneaking suspicion of what it is. I'm just going to do required fields only. Ah. I think for some reason that it did not like my VNDX-0001 when I entered that dash in style number. And that might just be like a system thing. I'll play around with that and let you guys know exactly what that error was and how to make sure you don't run into it. But I think for the purposes of today, it's not a huge worry. So I'm hitting, oh, it's not that. All right. I'm going to leave those other fields blank then, and I'll play around with it from there. I am going to fill in this because it's going to give us some information about the next tab. Wow. Okay, it's something with this printed ground maybe then. Let's see. Sorry about this, guys. Remember yesterday when I was talking about user error at the very beginning with PLM? This is my version of user error. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's got to be that type of print that must be giving the error. So you shouldn't have two options here. So that might be something that's just, I've got to clean up and wipe out of the system. All right, so we've got all of our header data, and we've got this first tab that we've reviewed. The next tab that's over here is additional header. So these are a bunch of those fields. So we would move component type over because it is a required field. And I try to condense these tabs. I highly recommend that you guys do as much as possible. That way users don't have to click amongst them. Screen Builder is great for that. These fields, for the most part, like waste factor, dutiable, use cost, inventory, track dialot, and these last two, you will not use because you are not using PLM. You can always use them to rename them for something else. Here's your merge groups, so you can assign merge groups at this level. Most likely you will not, again, because you're not promoting this to the style master, and a lot of your merge groups, for the most part, don't really apply to it, so it's not going to be a product category or a config or a style. We had royalty, we had material code in there. I think we had occasion. Occasion might be the one merge group that you guys screen build over in case you want to find your fabrics with specific occasions attached to them, type of thing. But you can make those decisions and then set which fields you want your users to complete. Your metric is a ULM, and you've got an HTS number. You're probably not going to use that again because you're not purchasing. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this very simple, easy to use record so it's not super overwhelming. User find, you've got a couple of these, again, probably won't be used here, but you can see all of these fields of the different ways that you guys can utilize the FTA record. So I'm going to skip over approval tracking for a second. And you can also reorg these tabs. I would recommend that you do. You can't really do approval tracking until you assign colors to a fabric record. So here's where you would click new. And you're going to assign, you can assign either a design color or a style color, or you can assign both. I would recommend at this point, because it's a 7-color print, you're probably not going to use your Pantones. Something like your Pantones or your internal colors would be used for more of like the piece dyed items. So here you're going to choose a color. You can mark this as active or inactive. I don't think you guys are going to be turning things on and off in that way. And over here, you've got your vendor that you can assign to it at a color level. And to the far right, you've got notes, and you also have a colorway number that you can utilize. The notes does come in handy if you have something specific to say about that color, whether it's to the vendor, whether it's to the internal design team, whether it's to production, something to note that color. Maybe, for instance, the vendor had developed this fabric and this print, and you guys are just sourcing it from them. There might be instances where you like 2 of their colors, you're designing internally 2 more colors for them to develop. Here it might be really nice if white was one of those vendor developed colors to say, this is from the vendor's selection. If we did not develop it, it is what it is. And then on the other 2, you would say like internally developed colors, so that you know that there are color placement files that are associated with it where there might not be with the vendor produced colors. There's an image over here on the right where you can attach essentially images to the colorway. So if you've got white, brown, green kind of thing, you can attach those here for a visual. I highly recommend it. And then when you click this little plus sign to unroll it, here's where you can indicate color placement for those 7 colors within that print. This comes in handy when you've got to do approvals on each of these colors. So if you're receiving the lab dip, the hand loom, the strike off, you would go in here and you would say, okay, tofu is approved, but maybe this other Pantone is not approved. Here are my comments for it. So it's going to keep track of your submits here and the approval status of that specific color within the colorway. Down here, if you enroll it further, is where you can add your comments for that submit. Which I might have to save again to get that to work. So here's where you can enter that submit date and the date that you approve it. Whether you're approving it, kind of like a hard yes or no here, you're approved by, in case it's somebody different than what has created the fabric record, and then you always have a free form notes field for your comments for approval. Any questions on this colors tab so far? So this is really just a place that's organizing all of the color approvals that you guys are doing today.
Yeah, I want to hear, this is your guys' chance to say, you know, this looks like a lot of work, or this looks like it's going to organize it. You got to be brutally honest with this part of the training. Someone, you know, talk a little bit, maybe Melissa or Loves.
For the submit date on the colors, does that not kind of submit itself when you send it out for development?
This specifically?
Yes.
No, it doesn't. That's a separate field that you have to complete.
Okay.
So we would call that, you know, that's something that you would, you know, on your wish list. I would like that to be auto submitted so I don't have to work for that. But the whole process of this is, instead of the email threads and the Excel spreadsheets, if you put all of your data in here, then you're going to get a report out that says, an exceptions report, this wasn't sent, or this is what was sent. And eventually the second wave of this is that we allow our vendors to log on, and then they, instead of email threads, they'll update their part, you'll update yours, and you'll look at this lead time that says, if I don't get this lab dip approval or whatever approval by this date, I'm going to miss my boat, you know, bottom line, my shipment. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Molly, go ahead.
Yeah, and Luz, part of the reason why that submit date is there is because there are some customers and some teams out there that deal with multiple rounds of submit. So maybe they'll say to the vendor, like, submit it, and then they have to go through another round. So this is the submit that was dated on 1/21/19, and I'm approving it today on 3/15. It took you 2 months to get to me. And then it is still not approved, so I'm not going to check that box. I'm going to be approved by, and you can always screen design this just to say like comments by or reviewer kind of thing. Lose, and then notes like the red is too red, the white's too saturated still, or coming across with too many blue tones in it, like whatever your comments are here. Mm-hmm. Now, and then you go back and you have to say, all right, now give me another submit. Then you add another one and you say, okay, this is the submit that from the date of 3/15. The approval date is 3/15 because you got, or like say 4/15. And then, yes, it's approved, and it was approved by Luz, and you got it right this time. So it's tracking essentially how many times you had to do approvals on something, and it's tracking specifically what submit you approved.
And the vendor will have access to this.
The vendor has access to the CSC record. They can see this data in CSC. They cannot enter like an approval date for you, or enter who approved it.
They can see the notes on why we did not approve something. So that eliminates the extra step of writing these comments in an email?
Correct. They have visibility to it.
Okay.
So this tab, I would recommend here that you guys put header and then go to vendors and then go to color. This vendor RFQ tab is where you're going to indicate what vendor is essentially creating those submits for you guys. So you'd have to say like that vendor, and we don't have any set up right now, but like vendor VNDX is what we were talking about before. You would assign that to that vendor. All you have to do is assign the vendor. All of these other fields are extra fields that you guys can use if you want in any way you want. There are things like vendor location type will default from the vendor type, so it'll say manufacturer here type of thing. If you have a secondary vendor, like somebody that's doing specifically the colors versus cut and sew, you can use those fields to designate. I don't know if you guys are tracked down to that level. I don't think so. You can mark a vendor as primary within here. You can specify a specific color to that vendor, and you can assign things like cost templates and stuff like that in the vendor and RFQ tab. Again, I don't know if you guys are going to be costing for raw materials. It doesn't sound like you do today. It may be something you're interested in. The big caveat in this tab is that this does not go to CSC. What this tab really does is you're assigning that vendor so that you can then submit requests to that vendor specifically. They can see your submit, but the costing portion of raw materials doesn't go to CSC, and that's a big takeaway for you guys here, and why I would say maybe this stuff isn't necessary.
Yeah, we're not going to be doing costing. It might change in another year or two, but for right now, no.
Yep. Okay, so we'll keep it simple. All you got to do here then is assign a vendor to it. So then we're down to images and approval tracking. So over on images, this is exactly what you have in design development. You're going to create new, go out to ... Say you have a picture of the base class here. That's really handy. Or if you only have one colorway, instead of attaching it at the color level, you can attach it at the record level. So you have images here. You also have images on colors. You guys might want to standardize this. If you're always assigning colors at this level, then you can remove the images tab from here. What that will do though is it will leave you without a thumbnail image here. I've seen people do that. I like this thumbnail image. It comes up when you're doing your grid view. It also comes up and just gives people kind of like a quick visual of what's there. So I would recommend keeping one and doing that as your general image, and then your colorways can go in here. So approval tracking, this is kind of the really meaty stuff of this FTA record. I'd say the header record and then approval tracking and the colors tabs are the really big ones. So here's where you're going to indicate the factory that you want to complete the submit. We don't have factories set up as of yet, but if you had 30 factories, you would see them in this drop down right here. Oh, I'm sorry, you wouldn't see 30 because you would only see the ones that are indicated in your vendor and RFQ tab. That's why you need to attach it here. So you would only see that option, that one or two option here that you've indicated can sample or submit on this raw material record. Over here for color selector, if you had 7 colors, if you had 4 colors, if you had 2 colors, on your colors tab, you will see those 2 colors here. Color independent is listed in case you're doing something like, I want a quality swatch or I want a hand loom, and you don't really care about color whatsoever, you would select color independent. For this scenario, we would choose white. Then it's going to pull down a couple things based off of that. It's going to give you a sample color, color name. These fields in gray, they're going to default based off of what you've already indicated on the colors tab. So right now you're choosing 1, 2 options. You're going to choose then sample type. We talked about here that in design development, you're going to do things like design, pre-production, production. In the BPR, we also talked about what kind of sample types are going to be in here. It lives in the same table, but you're going to have things like lab dip, hand loom, strike off, maybe a quality option here so that you guys can just get a quality for weight and feel, those types of things. So you'll fill in your sample type. Here's where you'll fill out your submit date, your sample request due date. for the vendor. And then how many samples do you want? Do you just want one option, or do you want 3 lab dips? Do you want 2 hand looms in 2 different weights, those types of things? So you're going to complete those fields. So to request one of these submits, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields. Your received quantity, we can, again, I think we can screen build this away. I'll have to double check on that. But your received quantity, obviously, you're not going to complete at this stage. It's there, I think, in case, a vendor sends you something that didn't get in the system, you can always fill it in at the same time. What that's going to do over here, let me just fill this in so you guys can see how this comes down. I don't think it's going to let me, though, because of my factory. It's going to come across in this grid. Let's say my request date is a month later. Yeah, it wants that factory, and it wants to see it in vendor, and since we don't have one of those set up, we'll have to wait for conference room pilot. That submit is going to appear as a row on this tab. It's going to have your submit number, so it's going to sequentially order these so you can see how many submits you have running on this FTA record. It'll have your vendor listed, your design color. All of this is populated from the information that you just filled out. All the way up through sample quantity, received quantity. Here's some of the fields that you guys can then give the vendor access to complete within CSC. Fields like ship date. The vendor will enter that into CSC and it will appear in here the next day for you guys. Sample received. This is, you can fill out once it's received if you're tracking at this level. I recommend it because it does give you, I requested it on this date, or I submitted it on this date, I requested it on this date, the sample was actually received on this date. So if you're filling out that field, you're getting tracking information where you can hold the vendor accountable to. Revision status, this is the sample revision status that we talked about yesterday, approved, rejected, or approved with comments. The official approval date, whether it is approved, yes or no, who it was approved by, and then you guys have a couple fields over here that are UDFs, again, user-defined fields for you guys to define if there's something else you want the vendor to fill out, or if there's something else that you guys want to fill out on your side. And then there's notes over here. So I think one of the big things here to consider is, are you going to approve, and it might be different for every FTA record. You can approve things and leave your comments on the approval tracking tab, or you can leave those color approvals down here on the color approval tab. So it's really like Blue Cherry is giving you an option to do some in-depth approval and tracking here, and you guys can do it at either level. It just depends on what you guys prefer and what the business requires. Any questions on approval tracking? Okay, so that is the basis.
Anyone? Come on, guys. Any questions at all? Are we good? It's Friday. We're drinking green beer in about another hour.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you now. Earth to McFly. Come in, McFly.
I think it all looks really good. It looks awesome. I think it would really help to keep everything like organized.
Love it. We need you to come in tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. to start. Is it okay? All right, sounds good.
Okay, so that is essentially the FTA. What I do want to talk about as well is your report shelves and your tracking and communication here. And then your specification package, setup and considerations. So report shelves, we talked a little bit yesterday about the report builder. This is more so for, I'm being recorded, so if you guys have this question later, it's really easy to look it up. Down on report shelves within report builder, the FTA has its own shelf. And again, it follows along with the tabs. Now that you've seen the tabs, so the details is colors, header and header notes over here. So the header is that full header tab that we were looking at. Vendor is the vendor tab. Construction approval, that is the approval tracking tab. So you've got those kind of all laid out for you. Sample, anything that's FTA is your report shelf for the FTA information. So again, you guys can create tracking reports on this. where the vendor is filling in that information on CSC. Hey, have they replied back with a sample ETA? Have they replied back? Have they shipped that submit that I'm waiting on for the customer that I have to send to, you know, Home Goods or Wayfair, whoever it is? You can really easily create those reports, then schedule those reports to be run daily and deposit it in your inbox. And then when you have a question, you don't have to go find the record of Blue Cherry that's on your tracking report. The other thing that you can do with reports is also communication. And we talked about this a little bit at the end yesterday, but I think at that point it was just David and I. So with the FTA, there are memo notes that are on attachments here. So if you want to communicate back and forth with the vendor via memo notes, you can create a new note. And essentially what this becomes is it becomes a replacement for email, so that all of your communication on this fabric record, on the submit and everything about it stays with this fabric record. So if you're handing off something from one designer to another or from design to production and somebody's not there, they're out of office, they're traveling, they're on vacation, they're just busy and you can't really get a hold of them, you can go into the header memo detail and you can read all of the communication that goes back and forth. And what I would recommend is that you guys communicate by entering first the date so that you guys have an idea of when that communication was created, and then also your initials. And then you write out something like whatever you need to say to the vendor. Maybe, you know, fabric swatch for sourcing was sent via tracking number, blah, 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 blah. And from there, and I found out yesterday, David, the reason why I can't find the OK button is because of the size of my screen here. And this only resizes the bottom portion over here. So if I carry it over to my larger screen, you can see it. If you guys run into those issues, it's just screen resolution. I'm not going to do it right now because mine's preset, but there's an OK button down here or a cancel button down here. You hit OK and that saves that header memo. Up here, you'll see there'll be a little check mark to tell you that there's some kind of communication here. Then what you do for the vendors and what you do for yourself is you set up communication reports. And based off of that note type and based off of the note status of it being open, you'll see essentially like a log of communication that's going back and forth, and you can see the vendor's response every day. That saves you guys from going into each and every tech pack to respond to this stuff, especially if the vendor hasn't responded. You can go back that day and say like, hey, urgent, need a response on this. You can go in there and you can close out and change the note status from open to closed so it doesn't appear on your report tomorrow. You can have the vendor do that as well so that you guys are essentially kind of pinging these communications back and forth, but keeping your reports up to date and concise. And Melissa might be able to talk even more in detail about these communication reports because she's got really good practice with them and how they worked and kind of reduce email communication and keep everything attached to either to the design style or to the FTA record.
Yeah, the reports are definitely very helpful, especially once all the vendors are using CSC, because you just answer and you can go in. You know, we used to review it as a team and then either one person or certainly multiple people can if it's a lot, but you just devote 30 minutes or so, update everything, and then your communication's done for the day.
You also have the ability up here to put attachments. So if you've got, things that you need to send the vendor back and forth that's in Excel, that's in a PDF file, something that pertains to this fabric specifically or this print type of thing, I would recommend that you're taking into consideration what those attachments are. Color placement files belong on the color tab, so those would not be an attachment. But if you have a document, say from a customer, that you need them to fill out, you can attach that file to it, and you can write a memo note and say, hey, the customer wants, X detail on this fabric that's, out of our normal realm. Can you fill out this Excel document? They fill it out, and they attach it back, and they write the memo note and say, document complete, and you pick it up here, and you can do whatever you need to do with it but it lives. The important part is it lives with this record forever and ever and always, which is great because history is there and maintained, and you're not searching for it in email. From here, there's the ability also to do a fabric, an FTA tech pack. So if you guys wanted to, you can take this information and turn it into a little PDF, kind of like a smaller version of a tech spec that you would on a finished good. And just takes this information and gives you like a handout or a page to give the vendor to keep for yourselves, to give to the customer if needed, that would give you a printout of all this information, the color options that were there, the images that are associated with the record and things like that. It may, based off of how you guys design it too, it could have all of this approval information or all your tracking information on it as well. So it just depends on how you guys want to do it. I've seen companies function without it. I've seen companies function with it. If you guys think it's something that you want to pursue, it's a custom form just like your tech packs are. But there might be something there if you guys find that you need some type of export or printout of that data. And you can send it to the vendors directly. You can email it directly. You can put it in somebody's inbox and print it. I think that's it for the FTA. Probably the biggest thing for you guys to suss out really is this prototype number and how you want to do that. And also what we were talking about before, whether you guys want to do this as base cloth and artwork, or whether you want to do that as two separate records. Any questions from the team on the line? Okay. And so David, I think that ends our session on fabric trim and art.
All right, this is great, guys. Any questions? Molly, did you have any questions from the last session that you wanted to ask these guys?
Yeah, I do. So a couple of questions from yesterday's sessions that came up after we hung up the phone. So yesterday we talked about, and I'll bring up the training agenda over here so you guys can see this a little bit more visually. Yesterday we talked about merch groups, and one of the merch groups that we had outlined was material code. And I think part of the reason why we did that, there is a field in Blue Cherry, and you saw it on the FTA, for material code. It's table driven just like a merch group. It lives at the FTA and design level. It's the same field. So you guys would have all of those options indicated there. But the thing is about that existing field is it does not promote to the style master. So if you're reporting on sales data and that material code is important for you guys to know on sales data, then we need to keep it as a merch group. And this is the exact same story as pattern code. These two fields exist only at the FTA and design level, but if it's something that you want to report on for sales purposes, and maybe that's a question for Brian.
Yeah. Can I ask you a favor? Can you email that, frame that in an email, and then email to him, CC me? He's not in the office today.
Yep.
I'll make sure I have an answer for you by Monday or Tuesday, okay?
Okay. Then the other question that I had as a follow-up, I'm going through your size ranges, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'm trying to figure out the best way for you guys to set this up, and what you'll have at the end of it. I think we said Luz was going to do this, but just going to set up size, dimension, and size ranges and PLM templates and things like that. So I'm working on how to configure this in your system. I'll give you guys a spreadsheet that will essentially allow you to do the data entry pretty quickly. There are so many sizes of tablecloths. On your spreadsheet that you guys gave me originally from the questionnaire, there's 74 different combinations here. So what I'm trying to figure out is, are all 74 of these in use, or are there, 10 that you guys really use commonly? Because it will depend on how we set up the POM code template.
That would be a question for Brian and Craig. or production?
Well, actually, from a design point of view, what in pattern recognition from you guys recognizing what the dimensions, do you see any that stick out constantly over and over and over?
There are a few that stick out constantly, but we just design. What gets placed on an order, we are not 100% sure.
All right. So Molly, let's do this. If you could frame those questions out, and then maybe we can do a call Tuesday, because I have a funny feeling Brian's going to probably, and possibly even Craig, they'll get into it a little more, because I want them to be really understand for this. I think it's a critical point.
Yeah, and off the bat, some of those tablecloth widths, I would say, don't look familiar to me, but that doesn't mean we don't ever use it. So for historical purposes, I think we would definitely have to loop in Brian, but I would think that there are definitely some that could come out just from 4 months of.
Okay, cool. There's some for sure, and like we can set up so that you guys have access to all of them. But what I want to be able to focus in on when you set up a PLM code template, like I can set it up with all 74, but when the design team uses that template or when production uses that template, if you guys have commonly used sizes, like, okay, we use 52 by 104 oblong often. We use a standard like 59-inch round. We use 70 by or 60 by 70, whatever. If there's 10 of these, then what we'll do is we'll preset the template to be set for only those 10 sizes so that you guys don't have to do a lot of marking things active and inactive on this very large PLM template that's going to have 74 dimensions. Similarly, if there's less than 74 that you guys are using, like this one exists only because it was used once in 1992, then let's take it off and not even set it up at all. And keep it out of the 74. It's just going to remove garbage from the system if we can kind of say, this is most frequently used, this is not, we don't need to set it up. It's not used at all anymore.
Yeah, look at the last, see, look in your dimensions. Look in the last 6. So if you work backwards, that one you're just on, go one right above there, 84. So 480x06. It looks like there's a pattern with that. The first 2 integers were probably, what do those first 2 integers mean? Does anyone know? The alphanumeric, the B and the O?
This was created by me, so I'm talking about how to set this up. This is all me. This is what you guys gave me, but I'm trying to figure out like essentially how we can do this so that you guys can cost by size. And right now this would be your dimension field, and it looks like almost every single one of these sizes comes in like an oblong, an oval, a round. So I'm trying to give you guys kind of like a shape integer there to put it in there. So like if you were trying to read this or on a customer order form, this is a smart number that you would immediately know is a round 60 by 60 tablecloth, an oblong 60 by 84 tablecloth.
I got it.
This would be oblong, this would be oval. So maybe on Tuesday's meeting, we'll go from I'll hide this, and we'll go from here.
Sounds good.
Or I can send this to you now, David, and just say, like, I've categorized these based off the descriptions, and you guys can just highlight rows and say, this is used for design, this is used for design, this one's only used, this is used for production commonly. Like, we need to find those common sizes, and it needs to be taken into consideration from the design perspective and production perspective.
Not yet. All right. Well, okay. Is he hanging out with cardboard? Phil? Sorry. All right, that sounds good. So if you can email that, we'll set up. We'll take a look at it.
Okay. Meeting on Tuesday, somewhere in between the other training sessions that are going on.
Well, what we'll do is maybe we'll carve out maybe like 10 minutes for the first meeting, and then we'll get Brian involved and we'll take a look at this, and he'll give an answer ASAP.
Okay.
And in the meantime, what I'll do is we'll give him some work to look at.
Sounds good. All right, that's it for me, guys. Any other questions?
That's all. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
great weekend.
You too.
Bye.